let me tell you, anybody who wants to write a book, you'll make no money. You may get famous, maybe if you're lucky, that's very rare, but you'll never make any money writing a book.
In simple terms, how do you define distributed leadership?
In the simplest way, it's what you would describe as true empowerment. It is distributing the decision making across the organization.
I've heard a lot of people saying, "Oh, you don't need a manager. You just need a leader." I say, but it's a myth, isn't it? You need both.
You've got processes and constraints in any system that need curation and management and monitoring and improvement, and human resources as a good example, and payroll, accounting, finance. These all need management. Management is a skill, is a technique. The way we engage, the way we interact, the way we sort of work together and collaborate together and communicate is changing because of the global dispersion of people.
What do you think? What is the foundation of this distributed leadership?
Leadership is not telling people what to do. You know, people see leadership being strong and powerful and they tell staff what to do, but a good boss or a good leader is a listener who doesn't blame people for failure, but listens to what they've learned, their experience, and that helps them make a better informed decision. Everybody has a very simple definition of leader or leadership. If you don't trust your people, you have a different problem and you need to solve that first.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Curious Celeste Chronicles podcast. This is your host Rohit Gautam. Today we are diving deep into the future of leadership with Nigel Thurlow, the pioneering mind behind the flow system and its revolutionary Helix distributed leadership model. Nigel has been Chief of Agile at Toyota. I'm very excited about this episode today because I'm sure you're going to learn a lot about distributed leadership within the organizations. But before we start, I would like to thank Abhyuday Global Coach Circle for their support. If you are looking to get into professional coaching, please do check out their upcoming programs. And if you haven't subscribed to this channel yet, please do so and click the bell icon so that you can get future updates for the new episodes. So without further ado, let's crack on with today's episode with Nigel. Hi Nigel, welcome to Curious Celeste Chronicles podcast. It's great to have you here.
Hey, thanks, Ray. I'm really pleased to be here, and I think we're going to have a really good, fun chat today.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this today because I've been waiting for this chat. I remember I posted on LinkedIn, I think last year, that I'm reading the book, and I think you commented on say, when I'm ready, let's have a chat. So I'm actually quite excited to have this chat today. So thanks once again for joining.
Good.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So, Nigel, before we start, I just want to say, what are you doing at the moment? Are you full-time with the Flow Consortium, or are you taking some clients as well? So just for audience to see where you are at this moment of time.
Sure, no, we're extremely busy, both with creating new educational content, I keep being asked to speak at events and conferences, which is a lot of fun because I get to meet a lot of the people that are trying to solve some of the challenges we write about. Of course, I've got client work as well. The team are out at clients, and my business partners and colleagues are busy with various different things. Professor Turner, who works with the University of, well, it's now Texas A&M. He used to be with the University of North Texas. He moved to Texas A&M some months ago. So he's busy on a lot of the research and a lot of the stuff that we dig into in the books, the stuff you've been reading. Brian, he's off doing things with high performance teaming and developing high reliability organizations. So some of the things we may get into in this conversation. So it's a smattering of everything. There's 2 more books we're sort of working on at the moment.
Okay, nice.
And one of those will be on about decision making and complexity. Another one, I'm trying to bring another playbook out to help those practitioners that have been looking at a lot of the lean stuff, especially in the agile market. It's not an agile book, it's a lean book, but I'm going to address lean thinking, lean practices, lean metrics, and things like forecasting and planning and estimating and measuring the efficiency of a system, those sorts of things that I think a lot of practitioners really struggle with. But that's all for the future.
That's brilliant. I'm actually quite excited about this as well when you just said about this lean metrics and and it's not for agile, it's for lean. So I'm quite excited. So hopefully we can do another podcast about this in the future.
You never know, right? I always swore I'd never write another book because books they suck
They
the
do.
life out of
They
you.
do.
And
Yeah.
let me tell you, anybody who wants to write a book, you'll make no money. You may get famous, maybe if you're lucky. That's very
Yeah.
rare, but you'll never make any money writing a book, especially technical
Mm.
books and books on the topics that we talk about.
Yeah, true. But it's a wisdom. Thanks for sharing your knowledge through books as well. So yeah, thank you very much. So Nigel, obviously the topic for this podcast, this episode is basically distributed leadership. So I wanted to understand. Obviously, I read the part in the book, the Helix, one of the Helix in the flow system. So in simple terms, how do you define distributed leadership?
I see. This is where I need my professor colleague here to give you the definitions from the book. But in the simplest way, it's what you would describe as true empowerment. It is distributing the decision making across the organization. And distributed leadership sort of is at all sorts of levels of the organization. You sort of, it's multi-level. So from the very senior levels to the very junior levels, it's across what we'd call, the multi-team systems, the teams, the individuals, the executives. It's also multi-dimensional. So it covers cognitions, so knowledge, capabilities, the behavioral aspects, as well as the social aspects. But at its heart, it really is just a matter of how we distribute the decision making across the enterprise, across the organization.
So I remember you mentioned in the book as well, like horizontally, vertically, is everywhere in between, right? Is that in between? Is that everywhere in the organization? Could you elaborate a little bit on that, please? Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, of course, you've got the executive level of the organization, which is obvious, but then look, you've got self-leadership. So individuals, have to learn how to lead themselves through what we describe as self-leadership. Of course, we discussed that in the books. And then they get their opportunity after that to practice in team environments using what we describe as a shared leadership model. But then you've got functional leadership, which is, the aspects of the organization, setting goals, aligning goals, coordinating activities and tasks, gaining external leadership support, giving support to multi-team systems. We sometimes talk about a role we define, well, we didn't define it, but we describe it in the book, known as the boundary spanner, which looks after leader to team interactions and team to team interactions, and teams to multiple teams. So when you've got multi-teams in a scaled environment, the relationships between them. So that's a functional leadership role, where a shared leadership, which is what I mentioned when we're talking about self-leadership, is where we sort of develop high psychological safety. And of course, we'll talk about that in distributed leadership, where we sort of set the stage and invite participation from the people involved. That's some of the stuff that Amy Edmondson talks around or talks about in her work on psychological safety. We reduce the power distance index, so we bring people closer together. We equally distribute the sort of power or the decision-making authority within the organization. We can talk about enabling constraints and how we control that. And of course, there's a strong bias to learning, continuous improvement. But then you've got strategic leadership, instrumental leadership, and global leadership as other levels. Now, global is easy because that's when you're in a very large multinational organization. You've got people managed across multiple countries or geographical areas, and we need that global team collaboration. So that's what we describe as global leadership, where instrumental leadership is sort of providing direction for the organizations to adapt to environments, external environments, internal environments, solve complex problems, or at least help to alleviate complex problems. And their leaders are capable of identifying sort of strategic and tactical outcomes in the environment. And of course, strategic leadership, if you're talking about things like Wardley mapping from Simon Wardley, or other techniques that help you set, goals, vision, direction, roadmaps. In complexity, we might talk about a vector we want to set in the vector theory of change. So these are all the different aspects. When we talk about leadership being at multi-levels, multi-dimensional, you're going from individual, single team, multiple team, executive leadership, on all those different categorizations that I explained.
Yeah.
I actually had a guy write to me, a fellow in industry, write to me from Germany, saying that once I'd sent him that material and that talks about it, it's in the book, but the material from the book, the slides and things, the visuals, it really helped him to understand more about the concept of leadership, because everybody has a very simple definition of leader or leadership. And of course, that gets confusing. And even the words leader and leadership mean different things. Leadership being more of a follow me individual construct, and leadership being more of a many to many or one to many social construct. And people just throw away these terms because every manager is now called a leader. And that's sort of, and you need both leadership and management. But leadership is at every level of the organization. The most junior new hire can become a very powerful, effective leader, because it's characteristics of their behavior, their attitude, their approach, their interactions, their engagement, which is very much different than you're in charge of this team or this product or this project or this process, which is more management. You need both. Otherwise, the lunatics run the asylum, but
I know, Nigel. This is I've heard a lot of people saying, "Oh, you don't need a manager. You just need a leader." I say, but it's a myth, isn't it? You need both. You need both. Yeah, because
you've got processes and constraints in any system that need curation and management and monitoring and improvement, and human resources as a good example, and payroll, accounting, finance. These all need management. Management is a skill, is a technique. Now, do you want people who dictate to you and shout at you and order you around and humiliate you? No, but that's not what we mean by management.
Exactly.
And if you've got a manager that does that, they're not a manager. They're, some, let's just say, unrepeatable word that we wouldn't use on this show.
True. Yeah, true. So, you mentioned regarding the levels, right? The in between, you mentioned like the shared leadership, self-leadership, and functional leadership. Is that the team and multi-team? And then you mentioned regarding leadership, like global leadership, strategic leadership. Is that especially for C-level, executive level, or you can't think? So,
like anything, I mean, global leadership, yes, you're talking about people who are responsible for a large corporation at multinational level, probably involving billions of dollars and tens of thousands of people and complex market engagements and environments. So yes, global leadership does have a level of skill and cognition, and it would normally be a senior role. But when you start to talk about things like shared leadership, that's more of a set of philosophies and behaviors versus, a type of role. But then functional leadership, then anybody can perform that at any level. I mean, let's do, again, back to the junior hire in a team. You join a team, you may start supporting the team. And let's take a scrum master, for people who in the software industry. What do you think a scrum master is? A functional leader. They're providing, we talk about servant leadership, but we are talking about somebody who provides leadership and guidance and mentorship and even teaching and coaching as part of their role. But they're also facilitating and enabling and the communications between different teams. Now, a program manager or project manager in more traditional ways of leading in projects and initiatives, they have those sort of same types of skills, those functional leadership skills. So these things operate at any level. Now, strategy. Let's take, you're a team in a giant organization, but you have a product owner or a product manager who's looking after the part of the product that you're dealing with. This strategy involved there. Which features, functions, capabilities do we prioritize? What are the decisions that are driving, or what are the influences driving those decisions? The internal and external environmental factors that's helping them make appropriate decisions. That's still strategic leadership. But of course, you can extrapolate that all the way up to this multinational global conglomerate where strategy is about how do we move things to affect the markets, and you see that every day in stock market manipulation. Decisions are made, press releases are made, and suddenly the whole global economy shifts. That's strategic leadership, but I'm pretty sure that a scrum master or a project manager in a single team isn't going to be doing that. I hope
No,
aren't going to be
no.
doing those things. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I'm so again, I'm learning myself as well when I'm speaking to you. So thanks very much for explaining that. In my head, I'm thinking like, some part of that nimble part of that global leadership, probably now we see kind of we can use it even. No, I know we can't be at that level, sea level
Sure.
where it's like global, but because our teams are quite diverse, they all come from different backgrounds. When I was reading the book, we mentioned like it's all over, but now people are kind of coming in. People are hybrid, someone working from India, America, Europe.
Sure.
It's kind of, you need that kind of skill even with like say a manager or project manager or a finance leader, I believe. Isn't it? Is that my understanding correct? That
Yeah, and you make a lot of interesting points because the way we engage, the way we interact, the way we sort of work together and collaborate together and communicate is changing because of the global dispersion of people. You mentioned many. I mean, if I have to talk to people in India or Japan, it's a nightmare because of the time zones. I'm in the
time
US
zones.
Central time zone. Yeah, I mean they're going to bed as I'm getting up. In Japan, I was up at 5 o'clock this morning to have a 6 a.m. call for 2 hours with somebody in Japan, but it was 8 p.m. at night
At
in
the night,
Japan.
yeah,
So
yeah.
this type of thing, I mean, so when you talk about functional leadership, that is really for me the most important leadership sort of construct, if you like. Not just, it's not a job title, it's a construct or a sort of a set of principles or philosophies, because you are talking about somebody who needs to glue the organization together, these communications, these dependencies, these interactions with different people, whether they're globally dispersed. So even as a functional leader, you're acting at a global level, although you're not making those global decisions for the organization. So a lot of these things interplay with each other. And even though we define them, it doesn't mean they're exclusive. Well, you only do these things if you're in this job. No, it's a set of practices, behaviors, philosophies, ideas. All these things flow together.
Yeah. I think thanks for explaining that. And what do you think? What is the foundation of this distribution leadership? Out of self leadership, shared leadership, do you think was the foundation?
Well, so everything we talk about sort of pivots on leaders' intent. Well, we call it leaders' intent. Of course, the military call it commander's intent. So, the work of Dave Marquet, and I know you've had some people on your show in the past who've talked about some of and some people with military backgrounds. I do not have that, where they've talked about leadership styles and what leaders' intent, or what the military call commander's intent is, which is really where instead of somebody having all the answers, and if everybody's ever heard Dave Marquet talk about with Turn the Ship Around and his podcasts, very, very funny guy, very, very clever guy, and very successful guy. But if you rely on somebody always having all the answers, apart from they have no life, so their life's miserable because they've always got to have the answers, then you tend to just be following orders. You're just doing as you are told. And what we talk about is the wisdom of the crowds, the collective leadership. So you have these senior leaders, for whatever reason, through experience or the way they've risen through the ranks, making decisions about the direction of the company, the strategy, this overall strategy. But that needs to be informed by the wisdom, the collective wisdom, or the collective leadership of the individuals and the teams within that are advising them. So when Dave Marquet talked about submarine commanding, the captain of a submarine, he would listen to all the different people at all different levels in the running of that vessel, because they had the knowledge, they had the skills, they had the deep experience, which he lacked as a new commander, a new captain. I'm not sure which the correct term is, so
I think
please forgive me. But basically, he lacked a lot of the knowledge and the skills of experience, even though he was already an accomplished officer commanding similar vessels. This was a new boat, as he called it, a boat going onto it, and he had to learn a lot of new things. So he was willing to listen and to learn. And, there was a quote that I wrote a couple of quotes down because I was having a conversation with a Japanese leader, an ex-Toyota leader today, with my friend Dan Protzman. We were in conversation with him. And he said, leadership is not telling people what to do. So when you start to talk about leadership and you talk about leaders' intent, commanders' intent, it's not telling people what to do. People see leadership being strong and powerful, and they tell staff what to do. But a good boss or a good leader is a listener who doesn't blame people for failure, but listens to what they've learned, their experience, and that helps them make a better informed decision. So when we talk about distributed leadership, we talk about how does the person in charge enable and empower the organization so that wisdom, if you call it the wisdom of the crowds or that collective experience, cognitions of the organization, how do their leaders enable them to make the decisions within what we call enabling constraints? So with the guardrails, we can't have the lunatics running the asylum making crazy decisions where, we're going to go and spend millions of dollars with another provider because I know a guy who works there. That's not what we're talking about. What we're saying is within the constraints, with these enabling constraints, the agents, the people or the machines, technology in this, because now we can't just talk about people, we have to talk about AI. So the agents in the system, and the word agent predates AI's use of it. So the agents in the system are free to move and make decisions and determine a course of action within those enabling constraints based upon their knowledge, their wisdom, their experience that they've gathered over the years. And the leader, the big bosses with the big fancy job titles and the bigger pay packets, are informed and listen to that. Leadership becomes a two-way street. It's not I'm in charge telling you what to do. I'm in charge, but I'm giving you an intent. I'm sort of explaining to you what I perceive the outcome will be, what I perceive the way we might achieve an outcome or some sort of end game here. But I'm listening to you for you to tell me how you believe that you would achieve that, how you give me your intent as how you achieve it, what knowledge you have, the wisdom you have, and together we work in a way that enables us to have a better outcome. And that's what Dave Marquet talked about in his work. But just as a Toyota leader, and the phrase from the lean world is Gemba. So we go to Gemba being the Japanese word for the real place, the actual place. And we would go to the Gemba and we will actually engage with the people doing the work. So the most senior leaders in Toyota, even though they're very high, they'll always come down to the level, and it seems derogatory to say coming down to the level of the people doing the work, but figuratively and literally, they will come to the workplace where the work is done, and they will learn and listen to the people with the experience because they're the people doing it every day. And if you're running a factory or a plant or a warehouse, or maybe you're running software development teams or digital economy, and things aren't quite going the way that you want them to go, your strategic goals, your OKRs, whatever you want to call them, aren't being met, maybe you need to go talk to the people doing the work and not just go bark at them and say, what the hell are you doing? Why is it we failing? Why aren't we meeting this week's month's targets? What and listen to them and learn from them, because that's how we improve. So when we talk about empowerment, distributed leadership, psychological safety, leaders' intent, these are all the things that enable that type of organization to function. Anyway, sorry, I'm talking too much, Rohit.
Nigel, I can listen to you all day, so I was just taking all in. So I think when you mention like going to Gemba, actually listening to them, it's very important because they always, like you said, they always say why are we not doing it, and why is a very, very kind of like wrong question to start with, right? Why? I mean, people think like someone is blaming me why I haven't done this, what I've done. So what are your thoughts on this? Like this question, why? We mentioned this asking good questions as a leader, right? It's one of the skills you need to learn. And then why is
Well,
very,
it's
I think,
interesting, and
yeah,
you mentioned India earlier, and of course
yeah.
I've worked with many, many colleagues over the years from India, which
Mm.
tends to be a very command and control
It
culture. It
is,
tends
yeah,
to be a very
yeah,
much a culture of
very
big
much,
boss
yeah,
says,
yeah.
go do this,
Do
and you
this,
don't
yeah,
question, you
yeah,
just go do it. And if you make
yeah,
a mistake, big boss will come and, why did you make a mistake, you
yeah.
bad person, or whatever the words will be.
Mm,
And it's hard to break that, of course, because some of that's cultural, some of it's just the
mm,
organization and the desire to meet demands and expectations that are placed of even on the most senior managers. I've spoken to many senior executives who themselves are still looking up at another big boss,
yeah,
and those
yeah.
big bosses are looking down
Looking
with
down.
these demands. And even
Yeah,
though they're in the
yeah,
C-suite,
yeah.
they may be part of a group of
Mm,
companies, and even though they're very senior, well-paid, well-respected executives, they're still frightened of things above them, which is, we have to try and remove this
mm,
fear. But look, if we fail, the initial human reaction is to hide it,
yeah.
because we know we're going to be blamed for the mistake we made, and maybe even people will look down on us as being not very good. That's
Mm,
the guy who always makes mistakes. They always cock up. It's always them that causes a problem. So we don't welcome mistakes, but mistakes happen. I mean, they just happen. I mean, it's a fact of life. We're not perfect.
yeah.
We're not machines, and
Machines, yeah.
even machines make
Even
mistakes.
AI can make mistake, yeah. So
Yeah, I mean, the
yeah.
hallucinations of the large language
Yeah,
models. So,
yeah.
but the thing is this, so the first reaction again, when you make a mistake, often with leaders, is, why did that happen? How did that happen? What were you doing? But they forget to sit down and say, what could you explain what happened so I can
Mm,
understand how to help you, or
yeah.
what could we do different next time to avoid this? How can we improve from this? So they don't often bother to ask these sorts of questions. But I mean, I talk a lot about Toyota, of course, because I was lucky enough to spend many years there, and I'm very fortunate to still be in touch with a lot of very, very clever and wise people from Toyota, both current and past leaders of Toyota. But what we really want to do is, I mean, we talk about this in the material, of course, is we want to reduce the power distance index. Now,
Yeah.
that's research from a Dutch professor, and the Dutch folks will always murder me because I never pronounce his name correctly. It's Geert Hofstede, and I apologize to all my Dutch colleagues. Some of them may even watch this and be cringing at my murdering, but he looked at the power distance index more to do with society levels. So if you go to somewhere like Iran, the
Mm,
distance between the decision makers and the citizens is huge. It's
mm,
massive.
mm,
Where hopefully in the democracy of the USA and the UK and places like that, the distance between the citizens and the people making the decisions is much shallower. It's still a big distance. But if you take that, and as we did, and bring that into the corporate context or the workplace context, can we bring the top leaders closer to the people doing the work? That's reducing that power distance index. Now, Toyota do this naturally by going to Gemba, going to the real place where the work is done and talking. And they actually observe and they understand and they assist and they take action. They don't just do sightseeing. A lot of people talk
mhm.
about Gemba walks. A lot of it's just sightseeing. They
Just
go
yeah,
through, tap people
yeah,
on the head,
yeah,
wave
yeah,
at them, and
yeah,
good luck and wander
yeah,
off. Yeah.
yeah.
So what we're talking about is bringing the bosses closer to the people who do the work and understanding what those people are thinking about. And listening is that really powerful attitude. And you know, as this Japanese leader said to me today, listening is more important than telling them what to do. And he actually said to me, he said, look, if top management always want to hear good news, then this type of culture will never be possible. So making mistakes, he said, in Toyota sounded terrible, but making mistakes is not bad because it's a source of learning. Failure is a new source of learning. And I posited to him, I said, so the secret source of Toyota, a company I'm well versed in, is they allow you to make mistakes. They welcome mistakes because failure is this new source of learning. And even Elon Musk, for the folks that love SpaceX and Tesla and all that, says he never learns anything when a rocket goes up and everything works. When
Mhm.
something blows up, he learns a lot. Now, he might annoy a lot of people, and we see that, with the last debris sprinkling everywhere over the east coast of Florida. But the point is this, he learned a lot from that to helping decide to do something better in the future. And the key part of this leadership behavior is leaders fix the environment, not the people. People, and there's sayings out there about blaming bad systems, and we always blame the system, not the individual. It doesn't mean that there isn't always. There's occasionally, somebody who's, it is just human nature, but. We focus on the system and fixing the system, not trying to fix people. And leaders should make it safe to fail. Don't add pressure and stress. And Dave Marquet talks about 2 pillars of empowerment, which we use in the book. And I think it's brilliant work from Dave Marquet. Clarity and competency. Now, competency is skill, cognitive ability, skills. And you talked about diversity in a team, in an organization. We focus very heavily on cognitive diversity, so shared cognitions. So you have knowledge that I don't have. I have knowledge that you don't have. So we learn to collaborate, and we're interdependent in achieving the outcomes. So we need to have the right competencies available in the individuals, but also in the teams, in the groups that making decisions. Because if I need to empower you to do something, and empowerment means I give away my right to decide. It's not delegation. I'm actually giving you the ownership of the decision. I'm giving away my ownership of making that decision. So you need that competency. So the first thing is, have you got the skills? Great, check. Next thing is, do you have the clarity? Do you have the right ethics, the right decision making? Do you know the right thing to do? Have you had sufficient time and learning and experience within the context that you're in to be able to make the right decision? The decisions for the right reasons. So that's the clarity. Now, what happens with leaders, that you tune your level of control depending on how much clarity and competency exists within the group you want to divest power to, you want to give that ownership to. Now, here's the rub. If these people don't have the right skills or the right clarity, it's your fault. You let them down because you're the boss, you're the leader, you're in charge. And it's my job. And Toyota is very simple, and the lean word, but Toyota is very simple. If you fail, it's my fault. How did I fail to coach, teach, mentor, guide you so that you could develop the right experiences, the right competency, and the right clarity? Now, Toyota do something called on-the-job development, OJD. A little bit, it's like training within industry, but it's not in the classroom. It's actually on the job doing work. And so you're being developed and mentored and coached while you do the work, because you're developing the life cycle of the organization, the products you're working on, the environment, the culture, the behaviors, but you're also learning by doing, rather than reading a book. It's like the Scrum Master problem. A lot of people took 2-day classes, got a PDF, and they're all good Scrum, but they've never actually written software or delivered a product or done any testing or any of this stuff. And, I don't blame them. I blame the industry and the system that blew up around this. Everybody was suddenly an agile guru. But that's that's what leadership is. If you need to give away ownership, otherwise you're doing everything. You're making all the decisions. You are now the constraint. It's theory of constraints now, but you are the constraint. You're the bottleneck. You're the problem because you won't give away control. For whatever reason, maybe you're fearful of that, you don't trust those people. But I have another, I think I even put it in the playbook. If you don't trust your people, you have a different problem, and you need to solve that first. You've got to solve trust, because none of what we're talking about will happen if you don't have trust.
Exactly. And something, Nigel, something clicked in my head, like, even I've seen sometime within teams, like we said, everyone is a leader, right? Horizontally, vertically, in between. Even sometime within a team, the environment is that someone experienced as a leader or a lead, they keep the information, right? They don't use that collective intelligence within the team to build that up, right? They don't give
you're getting into we're getting into the hero culture. And there's two aspects to this. There's the I want to be indispensable because I want to be the hero, the great person. Everything's going wrong. We always go to Rohit to fix everything because he always saves the day. Well, the problem is you're a constraint now. You are the
Big time.
bottleneck to the company
Big time.
because you're
Yeah.
not sharing that knowledge. I'll tell you how I solved this once in a previous company.
Yeah, please share your experience. Yeah.
But the other thing is fear.
Yeah.
So we talked about trust. The other thing is fear. So if you're in an organization which doesn't have, as Amy Edmondson would describe, psychological safety, and that really just means the ability to act and make mistakes and speak out without fear of recrimination or punishment or being, humiliated or something of that nature, basically what it means. And if you don't have that, then sometimes you hang on to those skills. You're unwilling to share and train and coach and mentor others and build that collective wisdom and that shared cognitions because you know that if you're not the most valuable person in the building, you could be fired in the next round of layoffs. So you hang on to that knowledge through fear. So there's the people who just want to be the big star and, the hero, and that's a limiting factor for the company. But sometimes we create the environment, the culture that causes that behavior. And I actually had, and of course I can't tell you who, where, and when, but I actually had somebody come up to me. It was an architect, so somebody from a digital architecture in a digital company, came and said to me, Nigel, I'd love to share my knowledge. I'd love to enable others, empower them, and train them and mentor them. But I'm so scared of losing my job. I need to be that most important person in the room. I need to be that sort of hero, not because I want glory, but I want to make sure that I don't want to find that they no longer need me and they can replace me. Now, the example I'll give you was many years ago, and I won't tell you the company for again, reasons of not wanting to embarrass anybody, but there was a lady who'd been there for 20 plus years. One of these people that built all the systems, digital company, built all the systems, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
And we had a team in India that had come onshore. We'd brought them in onshore to work for a couple of months with the onshore team to build those relationships and those friendships. So when they went back to India and they were more remote with all the limitations of this type of tech, and this was a few years ago, so it wasn't as great. We were on Skype, if that gives you a decade when. I know they just got rid of Skype, but when Skype was the only thing, that was the decade. It was a while back. But so communications weren't as easy over the digital lines back in the day. And we brought them on to build those relationships. But what we found, they've been there for like a couple of sprints. They're using Scrum. And their coach came to me and said, look, Nigel, it just isn't working. Every time a ticket, they were doing support predominantly. Every time a ticket comes in, a support ticket comes in, this person jumps in and says, oh, I built the system. I wrote that. I'll fix it. So everything that was, you've seen this before. So everything that's coming in, this person's jumping on and doing the job. Now, this was before everybody was wandering around with laptops in their hands, and they were compact computers. So to give you an idea, compact HP. Remember those days.
My first one was compact.
So we went into a retrospective, and I said, the team were there, the people from offshore were there, and the local people. And I said, look, we're going to do something. You, and I'm pointing at the person. I went, you, and I was not being horrible. I was having a bit of fun. I said, we're going to change your role for the next sprint. We're going to take and I said, for the next sprint, you're going to do no work. And to make sure you can't do any work, I'm going to unplug your computer.
Wow.
And we took the computer away. And, I had the authority to sort of play around with this a bit. And then I said, but for the next duration during the sprint, you're going to teach and train and coach and mentor this offshore team. You're going to help them to do what you do. And of course, this was met with a little bit of, reticence and reluctance and some weird faces. And the offshore team was sort of chuckling away under the breath because they thought this was great. And so we did it. And we came back to the next retrospective after that sprint had gone. And this person was the first person whose computer had taken away to leap up and say, this was the best thing that's ever happened. This team were phenomenal. They were awesome. Then not only did they do all the tickets when they came in record time, but they solved problems we'd had for months and months and months in this organization. These things that have been going on for years, technical debt and stuff like this. And they solved it. And what this taught was this, first of all, trust them.
Yeah.
The next thing was teach them, give them the competency, and then empower them, give them the decision making once you can see they've got the clarity. And this changed the whole dynamic. And of course, after more weeks together, they went back to India and the whole thing just worked as it was expected to work. And part of my advice to anybody is if you're doing hybrid work, bring the people together for a time, even if you've got to put them on planes and fly them in. These people need to build relationships. We're doing interdependent work. If you're doing teamwork, it means the work is interdependent. We cannot do it alone. If you've got people who can do work and they just pass it to somebody else, that's not teamwork. That's just dependent work. Yeah. And you just need good SLAs or good cooperation. I know when this is coming. But if you want to bring people together where work needs all these skills interacting and they're interdependent, that's true collaboration. That's true teamwork. And you need to build that together. Going to the mummy's curse and escaping from the escape room is not teamwork training, by the way. Paintballing and stuff. That's fun. Good, and gonna have a few beers, but that's not collaboration. You've got to build that in the context of the work, in the working environment. And I'm sorry, but the best way to do that is get everybody together, even with some money involved in doing that. Then you can work on a more flexible geographical hybrid model which suits people's lifestyles, but also the geography of the company and the budgets and the cost savings in the organization. But you've got to make that upfront investment, otherwise you deal with months and months of problems. Webcams aren't on in meetings. People are pretending to be in meetings. Maybe they've got a mouse jiggler.
I know, and then and it's really hard for, they have cameras off as well. There is no connection. There is no emotional connection either, right? We all talk into like a screen basically. So Nigel, as we mentioned, we're coming back to the psychological safety, which is part of a distributed leadership and leaders' intent. And I'm quite curious about, you mentioned about shared mental models within the teams, right? Within this leadership. Can you explain a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's there's no mystery or voodoo around it, and I have my critics of this. My good friend Dave Snowden doesn't really like the concept of shared mental models, but but this is real. It's like shared visioning. If somebody says we're going over there, then you really want everybody to agree that we're going over there. We're not going in 5 different directions.
That's it.
And so you need to get some alignment, some shared understanding of the problem. So, what's the problem we're trying to solve? What's the mission we're on, the direction we're heading in? Do we all have a shared understanding of the definitions of the problem, the language we're using, the vocabulary that describes the environment, the context, and this type of thing? Do we have a collective understanding and perception and knowledge about the situational process that we're dealing with? Do we have this collective understanding? Do we understand the resources we're going to need? Not people, because people are people, but technical or financial or logistical or other resources that we're going to need to achieve this. So really a shared mental model, if you want it in different languages, a shared understanding, a shared agreement, a collective commitment. I mean, Scrum talks about commitment if you're Scrum people or Agile folks out there. So commitment's one of their values. So it's nothing more fancy than that. But if you have a disagreement or a divergence or a misunderstanding between the members of a group that are meant to collaborate interdependently, because guess what? We're a team. And one of the definitions of a team is 2 or more people with a shared and valued goal, working together, collaborating towards a shared and valued goal. Well, if you don't have a shared and valued goal, then you don't really have collaboration or teamwork. So shared mental model is just the construct of helping to establish this common goal that we're aligned on, the direction, the mission, the vector, whatever words in the North Star, whatever words you want to use to go in that direction. But if that's missing, leadership has failed. Because now whether it's Go ahead. Sorry.
No, please. That's what I was coming on to. So what's the leadership role is here in this then, So if it's missing,
then you're getting back to your boundary spanner, your functional leadership role of earlier on. So leader's intent, commander's intent. So let's talk a little bit about that. the leader expresses the purpose of a desired outcome, and the thing they want to achieve, or they'd like to see the team or the organization achieve, and they're clear, concise, and they're making sure people understand that, and it's outcome focused, not KPI or OKR focused, although some people would say OKRs are outcomes, but it gives them the freedom for the people to operate, as I say, in those enabling constraints to achieve this. But the leadership should also give some articulation of how they think a result might be achieved, how they envision a decision being made or outcomes that are going to be achieved. And that includes, mission analysis and planning and the course of action and various other things will be discussed. So it's not just like the leader saying, go build this thing or go make this value or go to, and then the team go, okay, boss, and off they go. It's much more participatory and engaged and collaborative and conversational. But when you get into those sort of roles I talked about earlier on, which is those sort of the functional role for me is one of the most important ones. And we define a role called the boundary spanner. Amy Edmondson's talked about it in her work. We didn't invent these concepts or these techniques, but within functional leadership, as I say, it's all those interactions, aligning teams, but it's aligning team goals and multi-team goals and system goals. And we talk about goal setting theory. So you've got proximal and distal. Distal is a larger, you could call it a meta goal or maybe a scale goal, or hell, if they're doing SAFe, they'll call it a PI, a program increment. That's a distal goal. It's a combination of more than one piece of work coming together to achieve a bigger outcome. And then you've got proximal goals and Scrum, what people call those sprint goals. So these are short-term goals, which collectively across multiple teams in a multi-team system will collectively come together to achieve a bigger goal, which is more of a distal goal. Now, you may have many iterations, many proximal goals to achieve the overall outcome. But in functional leadership, we need those goals agreed and aligned. So shared mental model. Do we all agree on the big mission, the sort of the distal goal, the longer term view? Do we all agree at the team level, the proximal goal is how this small team is going to contribute towards this bigger goal? So functional leadership is also making sure, and this is where we talk about boundary spanning, because these are leaders that span the boundaries between teams or multi-team systems. You may be in one team, I'm in another. Each team has a boundary. We need somebody to be able to span those. Now, program management in traditional project management was acting like a boundary spanner without the telling people what to do piece. They're trying to facilitate that. So you could see agile coaches moving into this role. You can see middle management, team leaders, line managers moving into this role as a functional leader, as a boundary spanner, which takes on, depending on the organization, takes on different levels of responsibility, even including funding and financing of elements of this bigger system. But this functional leadership is making sure we've aligned the goals, we're making sure we've got all the resources that team needs, and we're coordinating those and supporting them. Maybe they're gaining external stakeholder sort of agreement or support for the work of the teams. And then, in a team level, you've got shared leadership focusing on the alignment of those goals and ensuring we can coordinate those interdependent and independent tasks. So there's different levels of functional leadership depending whether it's at the team level, the multi-team level, the organizational level. But these are things that, if you've got the badge leader on your shirt, you should be doing these things. And the problem is a lot of leaders see their role is just to tell people what to do and ask for reports. Give me my status report. Tell me you made the metrics. That ain't leadership, folks. That is not the definition of a leader. And if you're doing that, please remove the word leader from your job title.
Yeah, great insight, Nigel. Great insight. Like, those KPIs. Where is the KPI? What's the status of that KPI? What's the status of the OKR? That's what happens with most of the organizations, unfortunately. And this is, I think you mentioned a really great point, like the alignment. If as a software developer, if I don't know what my goal is as a team in the team and the team goal is for the organization, that means there is some misalignment there which leaders, like you
Yes.
mentioned earlier, the system needs to change. The system needs to, do
Yes.
that to make sure they understand why are we doing it, right?
I was having a conversation. I've been teaching a cohort, and I was having a
Mhm.
conversation with some amazing people who've been part of this learning experience I've been involved in and supporting them. And they were talking about a leader that has an obsession around metrics, an obsession around, KPIs, OKRs. It's got to be in a report. It's got to be a statistic. It's got to be a graph. It's got to be a chart, and all these types of things. And the thing you need to answer, and if you're a leader like this, you've got to answer, what are you looking at? What are you looking for? What do you want the system to be, to achieve, to deliver? And why do you think it's not achieving that? Because if what you're doing now, there's an old phrase, if you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten.
Mhm.
So if you're not happy with the outcome, the results, and I often ask leaders, what do you think the problem is you're trying to solve? And then I asked them, I said, do you understand how you do what you do? And I don't mean, at a meta level or a macro level, we make these products and services and so on. No, everybody understands that. And it's not the Simon Sinek stuff of start with why and all
Yeah.
that pseudoscience from before as it was. But, and there's nothing wrong in the underlying message of that, by the way. But the point is this, do you understand how stuff actually gets done? Because you're reading a chart, a metric, or a derived measure or something, and it's giving you an indication. But what do you think the problem is? So really, are you willing as a leader to actually understand why you're not achieving the outcomes, the results that you desire, or they're not where they want to be? Defects are high, quality's bad, customer complaints, we're not getting features, functions, capabilities shipped. If you're in manufacturing, you're not getting the throughput you want on the production line. You get, maybe got injuries or safety issues. So the thing is, we need to look inwardly at the system, and we start to find that it's not actually anything to do with the work we're doing. It's the way we're looking after the people, treating the people. And I was talking to another friend of mine today about intrinsic motivation.
Mhm.
And there's some statistics and data out there which sort of says that the more you make people focus on a result, the less capable they are of achieving that result, because their cognitive development, their skill development, their competency suffers when they're no longer motivated.
Mhm.
So we
Mhm.
talk about the work in the book of Mihai
Yeah.
Csikszentmihalyi. He's now no longer with us, but the American-Hungarian professor, philosopher, and he wrote about being in the zone, flow as being in the zone. And that's what sports people talk about. Their intrinsic motivation is so overwhelming. All they do is focus on the result, the outcome, because they're so in the zone. They're just in flow. And at a team level, we talk about it as a social construct where they're so engaged in the act of doing, they don't see anything else. It's just so. But if you drive people so determined towards a specific metric or number, they drop out of flow. They lose the intrinsic motivation. They no longer are so in the zone. They now are so out of the zone, and this is the stuff that leaders need to work on
Mhm.
and solve and fix. And if you're not getting the results, you've got to look at how you are leading and what we're enabling in the system. Are we constraining people? Are we dictating to people? Are we ordering people? Are we making them focus on some meaningless metrical KPI? Now, maybe you've got that push from above and there's nothing you can do about it. But then you get into Professor Goodhart, London School of Economics, Professor Emeritus. And he came up with Goodhart's law, which Dame Stratton, an anthropologist at Cambridge University, paraphrases: when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. Well,
Yeah.
that's the intrinsic motivation, being
Mhm.
in the zone, the flow.
Mhm.
All these things sort of start to come together. And when I look at this, I go, we know this. It's not new news. I mean, a lot of the stuff we've written about is stuff that other people discovered, wrote about, proved, tested. We brought it together in a compendium because nobody had really brought all these things together and said, well, these things all matter at the same time, not just one or
Mhm.
the other.
Mhm.
And that's really the work of the flow system, the sort of triple helix concept of intertwining and interconnecting these different things of complexity, leadership, and team
Team
science.
science. Yeah.
But this is the point: is we know this stuff, yet we keep banging a head against a brick
Mm.
wall and expecting a different result. And all it does is result in more pain and suffering.
Yeah, I think again, I'm thinking we all know this stuff, but we're not doing it. Maybe there is something that people, leaders need to learn this skill. Maybe they've not been taught about this. They've not been, they haven't experienced it. I think they're all coming from their own experience, their own, I want to say, mental models from their boss and then their boss and then their boss. It's kind of like the chain is
We're
running
talking
through.
about, yeah, we start to talk about preconceptions
Yeah,
now and the
yeah,
culture and the
culture.
nature,
Yeah,
nurture
yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
It's hard to break it,
Mm.
but organizations need to invest in teamwork training, leadership coaching. Of course, I'd say that because I sell all these things, but they need to be able to invest and spend put the effort into that to build the environment, because culture isn't something you can just curate and say we're going to have a culture like Spotify or McDonald's, or, but we don't want a culture like Boeing at the moment, but a culture that meets your ideals. You look at
Yeah,
some
yeah.
bastion of fantastic way of working. We want to be like Apple.
Mm.
But you can't just go and get the Apple template. It's like Toyota.
Exactly.
People
Yeah,
make the biggest
yeah,
mistake with
yeah.
Toyota. They copy the tools and methods, but they don't copy the culture,
Mm.
because you can't just copy paste culture.
Yeah.
What you need to do is create an environment for the right cultures to emerge. Culture is emergent, and a phrase I sometimes use, whether I'm right or wrong, I don't know, it's an opinion, is culture is a product of our behaviors. So it's the way we act and behave towards the work and towards each other, our communication, our collaboration skills, our attitudes, our approaches. And you have to teach that and you have to coach that. And if you do that, it will emerge, and the culture that you hopefully desire will emerge. And if you talk about Toyota, as I have a lot of experience there isn't a culture of being shouted at and berated and blamed. So you remove those behaviors and a different culture emerges, where it's
Mm.
okay to fail. It's okay to, they pull the Andon cord on the production line. The metaphor in most companies, I say, is how do your people pull that metaphorical Andon cord and stop the work? Do they have permission just to stop the work now and go investigate why we're having problems, or call attention to something? Now in Toyota, you can do that all day, every day. And people do it thousands of times a day, literally, on production lines, whenever they see a discrepancy from standard or something, a deviation, something out of whack, they call attention to it. But in most companies, you can't do that.
No,
So
no.
you can't just go copy a bunch of tools from
Yeah,
Toyota,
yeah,
put Andon
yeah,
cords, and then tell
yeah.
people not to pull them. I was actually talking to a manufacturer, an auto manufacturer, a few months ago, and they said, yes, we have Andon cords, but nobody wants to pull it because they don't want to be blamed for
The
stopping the
blame.
line. And I'm like,
That's it.
what?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
mad people. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And I wanna share this, my understanding of the book of disability leadership as well. Like, all these behaviors, especially in the culture, like you mentioned, it emerges. One company's culture is not another company's culture. So by
Correct.
doing psychological safety, active listening, collaboration, coaching, mentoring, the culture will emerge. A better culture will emerge for that organization. Not
Yes.
other organization, for that organization, if we have this distributed leadership behaviors in there, right? This is what my understanding is
No,
that
you're
correct?
absolutely
Yeah,
right.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah.
John Shook, somebody I've got to know over the years very well, and I'm very pleased now. He's a well-known person in Toyota circles. He ran what is now the Tesla plant up in Fremont,
Okay,
California, when it
right,
was the
right.
joint venture between Toyota and General Motors.
Mm-hmm.
But he also wrote books with Mike Rother, and he's written other books himself, Lean Institute stuff. But many years ago, when he was recounting his time at NUMMI, which was the joint venture between Toyota and GM, he said that what his NUMMI experience, I'm quoting now, but what his NUMMI experience taught him that was so powerful was the way to change culture is not to first change how people think, but instead by changing how people behave, what they do. And that was the key thing, is you had to change behaviors. Now that in NUMMI, they had a very bad run manufacturing plant. They had to rehire all the original General Motors staff when they formed this joint venture. And it was notorious as a plant, all sorts of bad behaviors. People can read about it and watch videos on my YouTube channel that talk about it. And John Shuck's interviewed and talks about it there. But what he did, he gave them the Andon cord, and he basically made everybody responsible for quality. And he said, whenever you see a problem, stop the line. And these people had never been given permission to stop production. They used to stop production maliciously in the old days of GM, and even set fire to the plant once they go watch a football game.
Right.
It genuine. These are real recollections.
Okay.
But once he said to them, now you're empowered, you own the decision to stop the line. Whenever you see a problem, quality started to improve. So we changed the behavior with a simple action and trusted people and obviously trained them effectively. They went to Japan, people got training. And even Amy Edmondson in her work talks about, the Andon cord and how people pull the cord to stop the line and how that creates a fearless organization. That's the title of her book, of course. And if you don't get that, you get problems that a Cornell professor, Kathleen O'Connor, if I remember the name right, called the common knowledge effect.
Yeah.
So if you have fear of admitting mistakes and you're blaming others, then people are scared to share their different views. So everybody will just talk about, it's the elephant in the room things. Everybody will talk about what everybody knows, but nobody will point to the elephant in the room and say that hairy thing there, because they're scared. So we need to remove that. And one of the way leaders can help with that is to show fallibility, vulnerability, to show that they themselves are not perfect. Now, there's a lot of leaders I know would never ever do that, but that's what's necessary, because then other people go, they're not perfect. Oh, it's okay to admit I'm wrong. That leaders now made it okay for me to say I made a mistake, because they're happy to make a mistake and nobody's firing them or shouting at them. And when I say I made a mistake, they ask me how they can help. And I coined a phrase I was in an event somewhere on a panel. I was with Jeff Liker and Mike Rother, two amazing people in the lean world. And I said, red doesn't mean bad. Red means I need help. So when the current status on a project, an initiative, a scrum team, whatever it is red, or a red light on a board is red, it means I need help. Not it's bad, it's wrong. So if I'm showing you a red status on a project status report, which you should get rid of, the evil anyway, you should just look at you spent millions of dollars on tools like Jira and Rally and all these other tools of demonic possession. So use them. They've got dashboards, and just look at the real-time data. Stop asking for damn status reports. You're just wasting people's time and ability. But if the status is red, that means don't shout at them and say, what are you doing to fix it? Look at the issue and risk registers or impediment backlog or whatever. Go and say, what can I do to help? How can I help you solve that blocker, that impediment, that problem that's causing that red status? Red means I need help. It doesn't mean it's bad. And that's that's a behavior change. Make that, and you'll dynamically and immediately change the environment and the culture in your organization.
Brilliant, Nigel. Brilliant. I think it's a great way to end this podcast. Unfortunately, we are running out of time, but it's a great way to end this. And hopefully, audience will learn a lot from this episode. So thank you very much once again for sharing your wisdom and insight. And hopefully, we can do another podcast soon on the new books.
We'll see, but thank you so much for having me along. I hope some of the ranting and rambling has been useful, and I appreciate your time, Rohit. Thank you.
I thoroughly enjoyed it. I don't know where 1 hour gone, to be honest. So I could listen to you. Like I said, I can listen to you. I can do another 1 hour, but we have to respect the time. So yeah,
thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Nigel. Okay, listeners, take care, stay safe, and I'll be back soon with the next episode. Till then, take care. Bye for now.